Welcome back to the Multiverse, my fellow watchers, where I pin different franchises and mash them up to see what would have happened. In today's Multiverse episode, it's been a highly requested one for over a year now, and that is going to be what if John Wick became Batman? How do you think this insane timeline would unfold if Mr. Wick had been the Caped Crusader? If you guys enjoy these videos and would like to see more, do make sure to subscribe because only 10% of you are subscribed. It only takes 2 seconds and I would be highly appreciated. But that being said, let's get into today's video. Rain bounced off the sides of his suit, the material embracing his skin until it caused rashes to break out, each glistering. Scarlet blotch on his flesh reminded him of the kills he made with the suit, the crime he had stopped, the crime that he had caused. It all depended on the day, and what lies the news spread about him. John was always on two sides of the same coin. When the coin flipped and landed on heads, he was working with the police to stop crime. He'd get the early peek at investigations, and he'd bring criminals in. When it landed on tails, he'd work with criminal organizations and got the jump on the ones who brought pain to the world. Today the coin was on tails. Before him, he was at a cathedral. The rain painted it with a hue of silver. From the angle he was standing at, it seemed as though the cathedral was a spiral that oozed its dominance over him. If he were anywhere else, he would have cowered away. However, the mask covering his face came down and hugged his nose, hiding his eyes behind the thin sheets of white fabric. There was no tech on his suit. He didn't need it. All he needed were pistols, which were hidden. They were tucked away on the inside of his waistband. His gloves were covered in fading carmine, the black base of it cloaked with the moisture falling out of Heaven's Gate. It baptized him, but he didn't come out any holier than he was before, if he could even define himself as holy, that was. His legs went through the mud of the grassland, no trees in sight. The clearing made his dark suit stand out more. It wasn't a traditional suit. There was a jacket on his figure, but it stretched up and hid his neck from view. The pants were tight enough that they didn't snag against the ground, but his combat boots were old and tearing at the edges. He was sure the soles looked like a war zone similar to what the cathedral was about to look like. The cathedral was giant enough that it could have been its own city. There wasn't a city surrounding it, but there was one nearby. You'd think a cathedral would overlook millions of people, but this one was hiding. It reminded John of someone. He went inside and tugged on his mask. The ears on it pointed upwards, but the pieces of cloth came nowhere close to the ceiling. The corridor was decorated. John wished he could describe it. The pews on either side of him were spew wood with no chips in sight. The golden accents on the otherwise pale walls ran up the pillars of marble. Stained glass depicting religious figures, but barely allowing any moonlight to peek in. John basked in the little light. The light hue on the pillars weren't emitting any colors that John could see. That could have been because of the somber mood, or maybe the isolation, or maybe it was all in John's head. Wilson won't hesitate to make his move, a male voice said from the opposite side of the area. The voice reverberated across the wide walls and ceilings that was at least 20 Johns above him. We need to send Mr. Wick to take care of it. He just took care of it, Mr. Sion. You want him to take care of Wilson too. You realize how he'll react, another male voice said. John kept his footsteps soft, making zero noise as he dragged Grim inside the holy house. The carpets were made of different strings, but he was sure he would be making it appear more chestnut than red. Our organization will fall apart if we don't do this, the first male said, John noticing them standing at the altar, not far from him. John cleared his throat to announce his presence, halting once he was 10 feet away. The two men swiveled their heads around to see that Batman, the cape he had ripped in half and covered in holes. There may have been blood stained there too, but John didn't care enough to check. Wilson's back, John asked. and the weapons all loaded. There was an assault rifle, a few pistols, even a sniper that needed to be constructed. He's back. Did Mr. Sion put up a good fight? What do you think? The men went quiet at that. You know the cops will find us eventually. You'll take care of them like you always do. You have your buddies on the inside still, right? The first man, Ezekiel, said. Is that a risk you want to take? Ezekiel's thick lips curled upwards on his skin, the scar splitting apart his eyebrows, raising as he grimaced. The other in the room, David, ran his four-figured hands through his dark locks. John couldn't tell whether they were exhausted, enraged, or both. Take care of Wilson tonight. We have his coordinates, David said, after he finished sweeping his clump of hair. John was only working for this organization to find Mr. Sion, a man who was terrorizing John's part of town. The Batman preferred to keep himself neutral, but he cared when the crime came to his streets, when it threatened his neighborhood and his dog. That dog was the only thing he had left. Give me his coordinates, John said. And that got Ezekiel to take the map of the podium, the streets of the city highlighted for John to see. That was when he pointed to a specific place on the map, John's neighborhood. After we take care of Wilson, we'll take over his organization and resume progress in this neighborhood, he said. No. Ezekiel and David snapped their heads to John at that. But it was David who spoke. What do you mean, no? I'll take out Wilson, but only if you stay out of that territory. That neighborhood is a dump. Do you have any idea how many people will come to us for our product? We can't give that up because you have feelings for that place, Ezekiel said with a snort. That was when the coin flipped inside John's mind. He threw the punch before his brain could agree with the move. He saw it was a flash of his dog's face, and what would happen if he allowed Ezekiel and David to bring their crime to his neighborhood. He was only Batman because of his dog. After his wife passed, she left him a puppy that developed a bat-shaped pattern on her face. That was what aided his decision. He needed to protect what he had left. That led to where he was with his fist, breaking Ezekiel's jaw. The crunch that made it echo throughout the halls. It was silent otherwise. It felt like there needed to be loud music booming, but there wasn't a single sound. All that was audible was the grunts of the men who dared to fight back. Batman kicked him while he was down. David pulled out a retractable knife to continue the assault. Batman was quickly to disarm the man, sinking the blade into the flesh of his neck. As the blood squirted out and joined Batman's collection, Ezekiel shouted out about the death of his friend. Batman took the knife out and shook off the liquid, some of it dripping onto his boots. Some of it went onto the holy floors and stained it with a grim that could never be removed. He turned and prepared to fight the final man, but he covered away with his hands in the air, as if that would defend him. Batman took another step, but Ezekiel's voice halted him in his tracks. Why are you doing this? You're working with us for months without a problem. What's the meaning of this? We're all puppets, John said, kneeling and allowing his cape to frame his body like a shadow. We're all putting on different performances for different days. We don't know who we truly are, but at the same time, not knowing is all we have. I changed because the one pulling my strings is starting a new performance. John pressed the knife against his chest. It was only a tip, but it was enough to bring troubles from the doomed man. I only have one thing left, and it won't let you take her from me. And with that, Ezekiel's life was ended. John was left in the cathedral. It was silent, isolated, abandoned. In a way, it reminded him of home. There was no laughter from his wife, no smell of eggs and bacon, no TV playing in the background. His wife wasn't there. John wasn't there either. It was Batman instead. And that is going to be what if John Wick had become Batman. We could really take this story in so many different ways if I do continue it. That being said, what did you think of this alternate take of John Wick becoming Batman? I do know that Keanu Reeves is playing Batman in some animated movie, but this is a completely different take. If you guys do enjoy these videos and would like to stay all up to date with the latest content, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. That being said, take care and have a fantastic day.